Welcome to Trust the Code, the Alkebuleum podcast, exploring African digital sovereignty, identity institutions, and the future of trust. In many systems, trust is not built into the infrastructure. It is carried by people, offices, brokers, stamps, paper files, and personal connections. That may work for a while, but it does not scale into a digital future.
Right. And that lack of scaling is what we really want to dig into today.
Exactly. So for today's deep dive, we are really unpacking this whole concept of the middleman. Because, the key message we want to establish right out of the gate for you listening is that the problem is not that middlemen exist.
Yeah, they're just a symptom, right?
Right. The real issue is when trust depends only on those middlemen, because the system itself just cannot verify what is actually true.
Because if the system can't prove a fact, you literally have to find a person to vouch for it.
Exactly. So to understand how to build real trust infrastructure, we first need to examine how trust is currently carried right now in the absence of that infrastructure.
Okay, so let's define what we mean by a middleman here, like in the context of our modern economy.
Yeah, so think about identity verification or records, payments, ownership, finance, all of that. A middleman is the broker who manually verifies your land deed, or the clerk who puts a physical stamp on an official document.
So they are basically the human glue holding everything together.
Precisely. They become completely necessary because our systems are fragmented, they are paper-based, or they just aren't digitally verifiable. So they act as these human bridges between totally disconnected databases.
But wait, let me just challenge that premise for a second. Are all middlemen bad? I mean, if you hire a broker to help you navigate buying property or, a consultant to figure out some tricky regulations, they are providing a helpful service, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we need to draw a really thick line between a helpful service provider and a gatekeeper.
Okay, so how do we define the difference?
Well, a service provider is someone you choose to hire. You pay them because they offer specialized expertise, or they save you time, or they just offer convenience.
Right, like they're actively adding value to your transaction.
Exactly. But a gatekeeper is different. A gatekeeper is someone who monopolizes and controls access to trust, simply because the system cannot verify facts without them.
Ah, I see. So you don't hire a gatekeeper because they're an expert.
Right. You are basically forced to pay them a toll because they hold the keys to an unverifiable system. Like if a specific clerk in a specific office is the literal only person who can access a physical ledger to confirm you own a piece of land, they are a gatekeeper.
Wow. Yeah, they aren't adding any value to the land sale itself. They are just holding the stamp that allows the sale to happen.
And once we understand that difference between a service provider and a gatekeeper, we really have to look at the massive real-world friction this creates.
Which brings us to the reality of paper records, right? I mean, manual verification and these disconnected databases just create this massive unnecessary dependency.
It really does. People and businesses lose an immense amount of time and money just constantly having to prove the exact same facts again and again.
Yeah, I think about the examples from the source material we were reviewing, like the student from Ghana.
Yes, that is a perfect example. So imagine a young professional earns a highly respected degree from a university in Ghana, and then they apply for a job with an engineering firm in Kenya.
Right, and the Kenyan employer is sitting there looking at this resume.
Exactly. And because there is no shared trust infrastructure, that Ghanaian degree doesn't easily travel. The Kenyan HR department has to pause the application. They can't just take the applicant's word for it, but they also have no secure, instant way to verify it.
So what do? They probably have to hire a third-party background check agency, which is, you guessed it, another middleman.
Right, and that agency has to physically reach out to the university's registrar in Accra, pay a processing fee, and then wait for a clerk to literally dig through a physical filing cabinet or a local siloed database.
Which takes weeks, I imagine.
It can take weeks. And by the time the degree is finally verified, the engineering firm might have already hired a local candidate whose credentials were just easier to check. So the applicant didn't just lose time, they completely lost the opportunity.
Oh, man, that is so frustrating. And the source material also brought up the Nigerian business scenario, right?
Yeah, the credit history example. Imagine you spend 5 years building a flawless business reputation in Nigeria. You pay every loan on time, your supply chain is solid.
But the moment you try to expand that business into Kenya, your credit history basically vanishes.
It completely resets to zero because the trust you built is trapped inside a local database in Lagos.
So you are a proven entity at home, but a total ghost across the border.
Exactly. I like to frame this as a massive infrastructure gap. Imagine trying to build a thriving cross-border economy without paved roads.
Right, nothing can move efficiently.
Exactly. Except in this digital case, the missing roads are the pathways of verifiable truth. You just cannot scale an economy if every interaction requires manual approval.
And beyond just the friction and the delays, I want to ask about the darker side of this dependency. Because it seems like all this manual, paper-based verification opens the door to some pretty severe systemic issues.
It absolutely does. When an economy is heavy on middlemen and unverifiable systems, it naturally creates a breeding ground for fraud, forged documents, and bribery.
Because if the only proof of a fact is a piece of paper, well, someone can forge that paper.
Right, or they can conveniently lose it. Look at the examples of land registries in places like Liberia. When records are centralized and paper-based, a land title can literally just be erased or contested.
Which is catastrophic for a family. That's their generational wealth gone.
Exactly. It wipes out their collateral, it breeds unequal access to capital, and it creates systemic corruption. But, we are seeing real structural responses to this.
Like the anti-corruption pilot in Liberia?
Yes, that pilot is currently anchored on the Alkebuleum network. They are moving public procurement and disbursement records out of those vulnerable paper files and anchoring them on a verifiable shared digital ledger.
Which mathematically closes the room for manipulation. That is huge. So if paper systems and disconnected databases are the root of all this friction and fraud, how does the underlying technology actually need to evolve?
We basically need a complete paradigm shift in how we handle trust. We have to move from asking, "Who do you know?" to asking, "What can be mathematically verified?"
Okay, unpack that a little bit. Who do you know versus what can be verified?
Well, in the old model, trust is based on personal connections or knowing a specific broker or trusting a single isolated office. The new standard uses technology, specifically blockchain, to prove facts without relying on the manual labor of an intermediary.
Okay, wait, I have to do a quick assumption check here. Because I know when a lot of people listening hear the word blockchain, they immediately assume the goal is to completely bypass governments or central banks or formal institutions. Is that what is happening here?
No, absolutely not. And I want to vehemently clarify that point. This is not some anti-institution movement at all. Institutions still matter deeply.
Right, because a digital degree doesn't mean anything if a real university didn't actually issue it.
Exactly. A digital identity is worthless without a sovereign government backing it. The shift is simply that the role of these institutions has to change. They need to transition from being isolated gatekeepers of paper records to becoming trusted participants in a shared digital trust layer.
Oh, I see. So blockchain, when used properly, isn't about making institutions illegal. It's about creating shared, verifiable records that anyone can reference.
Precisely. It reduces dependency on the middlemen.
So this brings us directly to the specific infrastructure being built for the African continent to facilitate this, which is Alkebuleum.
Right. Alkebuleum's mission is directly aimed at solving this middleman dependency. They are building a sovereign ledger of trust that institutions, businesses, governments, and citizens across Africa and the diaspora can verify.
And this aligns with those massive macro-architectural goals, right? Like the African Continental Free Trade Area and the AU's Agenda 2063.
Exactly. You cannot integrate a massive continental economy on foreign, unaligned infrastructure. You need a sovereign base. But the really fascinating part is how Alkebuleum operationalizes this institutional trust.
Right, because if I am trusting this network, I need to know who is actually validating the transactions. It isn't just random anonymous miners, right?
No, not at all. They use a consensus mechanism called PORA, which stands for Proof of Reputation and Authority.
Proof of reputation and authority. Okay, how does that work?
Well, the network is validated not by anonymous actors, but by the very institutions the continent already trusts in the physical world. So we're talking about central banks, commercial banks, major universities, regulators, and fintechs.
Oh, wow. So a commercial bank in Nairobi isn't just using the network, they are actually helping secure it.
Yes, they are validating it, which means the network literally inherits the combined credibility and real-world reputation of its institutional validators.
That is a massive shift in incentives. So for the listener who's wondering how this actually works for them on a day-to-day basis, what are the foundational protocols built on top of this?
There are three main foundational protocols. Let's start with the identity protocol. This uses something called zero-knowledge cryptography, so citizens can prove who they are without surrendering all their underlying personal data.
Okay, zero-knowledge cryptography. So instead of handing over a photocopy of my passport with my home address and birth date just to prove I am over 18, I could just prove the fact itself.
Exactly. You hand them a mathematically sealed proof that basically just says, yes, This person meets the age requirement, and the person checking it gets absolute certainty without ever holding your actual sensitive data.
That is incredible. And what about the records that other people issue about me?
That is the second pillar, the Institutional Records Protocol. This anchors tamper-resistant certificates of birth, marriage, university education, professional licenses, all of it.
So if I am synthesizing this for the listener, Alkebuleum isn't trying to replace the university or the bank. It is essentially providing a shared, indestructible bulletin board.
A bulletin board, exactly.
And those institutions can just securely post their cryptographic proof of their records on this board for the rest of the economy to instantly verify.
You nailed it. Which leads right into the third pillar, the credit protocol. This takes that same concept and applies it to your financial reputation, creating portable credit histories that can literally travel with an individual or business across borders.
So going back to that Nigerian business, their local bank just pins a cryptographic proof of their solid repayment history to the ledger.
Yes, and when they walk into a bank in Kenya, they grant that new lender access to view the proof. The data belongs to the business, and the gatekeeper is removed.
This is so fascinating. And as we bring this deep dive to a close, looking at the ultimate vision of Africa's digital economy, what is the final takeaway here?
The ultimate takeaway is that the future state we are talking about is not about removing every single intermediary.
Right, because service providers are still useful.
Exactly. It is about removing the unnecessary dependency on unverifiable systems.
And that leaves us with a really provocative final thought to ponder. If an individual's reputation, their professional credentials, and their credit history become fully portable and, instantly verifiable across 54 nations without ever needing a gatekeeper's permission, how does that fundamentally change our understanding of geographic borders and human potential?
Africa's digital future cannot depend only on manual approval, paper trails, and private gatekeepers. It needs shared infrastructure where identity, ownership, records, and institutional actions can be verified. That is how trust moves from the middleman to the system itself.